It's the rock and roll and coffee show. Yeah, with Joe.
What's up, bud?
Hey, Joe. How are you, man?
I'm good. How you doing, buddy?
All right. Sorry about that.
Hey, you know what?
No, I got caught up. I was in the shower, and then I got out, and I'm like, oh, shit, what time is it?
No worries. Yeah, that's not the first time that's happened, believe it or not, so no worries. Everything's good.
Not like we got a lot going on right now. You know
right?
What I mean?
Right? What else are we going to do at 9 o'clock?
That's right. Now, where
What's that?
Where are you calling? Where am I calling you? Are you in New York?
No, I'm in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Myrtle Beach.
Yeah, man. I've been here about 5 years. I moved here from California. I was out there for a little bit, and before that, I was down in the Tampa area, Florida, most of my life.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's where you grew up. You spent your formative years in Tampa.
You got it.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
Great place, man. The Yucatan liquor stand.
Oh, yeah. You've been there plenty of times.
Yeah, of course.
You know, that's the first place I saw you guys, actually, was at a 98 Rock Livestock in, I want to say that was probably, was it 90, 91?
Yeah, probably 1990, I'm going to say.
Yep, and it was you guys and Sabotage, Every Mother's Nightmare. I'm trying to think. Cry Wolf.
Dude, wasn't that in Zephyr Hills?
It was in Zephyr Hills, yep. King's X was there.
Yep, I remember that. That was a great gig. We have a great picture that King's X was always a big influence, and not big. I mean, we love that band, and
sure.
They played with us, and we got a great picture of me and Pete with Doug Pinnick, and we were just. It was kind of weird because they had to open for us, which on a festival, it really doesn't make a shit of difference.
Right.
But we felt so bad. And we were telling Doug, we're like, dude, we don't want you guys going on before us, man. How are we going to follow you? And he was so cool about it. He's like, hey man, this is the way it goes. He was just such a cool guy. And we're still good friends with those guys. So it's that brings back a lot of great memories.
Yeah, they were a great band. And I still have that ticket, and you know what the cost of that show was? $5.98.
There you go.
Can't get that these days, right?
You certainly can't. Well, you can't really get much of any shows these days, but
right. So listen, you recently posted a photo that on your Instagram. I think I commented on it, but it was you outside in the snow with your Van Halen guitar doing that rock pose. That is an awesome photo, I gotta say.
Well, man, it was one of those things. So are we in the interview now, or are we just bullshitting now to get warmed up?
No, man, we're recording.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, so how do you, I don't understand. So do you cut this up, or is this just kind of a live live without a net type thing?
That's it. I mean, we just go with it. I mean, we could end up talking about, who knows what we're going to talk about, but we just go with it.
Okay. Yeah, well, we just got done. We had a huge, pretty massive snowstorm. I think the biggest snow we've gotten here in the northern New Jersey tri-state area in the last 5 years. So, we wound up with like over 20 inches of snow, and I was like, you know what? This is a cool moment to grab my 5150 guitar. So I made the joke. We got like 15 inches plus 5150. Always got to do a little nod to the King Edward. He's looking down, going, Steve, man, be careful shoveling that snow. You might screw up your hands.
Yeah. Man, what a loss that was, wasn't it?
I mean, one of the biggest in rock and roll history.
Yeah,
when you lose,
that hit hard. That one.
Yeah, it was. I can't really put it into words. And Ed was a friend for close to 30 years, and my biggest influence, my idol, who became a friend and did a lot of great things for me and my family and my bands. Gave me tons of gear and just the support, and just such a shame. It's kind of like I've told people, it's like losing a family member.
Yeah.
And like he always say, Steve, whenever you come, man, you're family. You come to the show, you come hang with me, and I just am blessed to have had some of the most incredible experiences of my life with that man.
Yeah.
And just one of the greatest guys. If you ever had the chance to meet him, and I tell people this all the time about Ed. And people that have met him can, they back this up. There was never any ego with him. He was just the coolest, fun-loving guy who just loved. I mean, we bonded over so much over humor, which was the real cool thing. When I first met him, I didn't sit there when I first met him back in 1991. I didn't go, oh, Ed, Mr. Van Halen, can you show me how to play? Can you show me how to play Unchained, or how do you play the solo for Push Comes to Shove? And it wasn't that. I mean, when we were talking about, we were talking about fun stuff. We were talking about goofy movies. We were talking about, jokes and doing Eddie Murphy jokes and Sammy Davis Jr. stuff. And that's really how we bonded, And as we know, laughter is a common bond that I think a lot of people have and a lot of people need. So it's a bummer, but again, I remember all the great times and just all the great, incredible, mind-blowing experiences I had with him. And at the core of it was just the fucking most fun guy, nicest guy in the world. Would call my house and talk to my wife, and then. And, she'd talk to him for 15 minutes and go, oh, Steve's here. Oh, yeah, put Steve on. Let me talk to him. And
he forgot he was calling for you.
Yeah. But that's, I think it's, look, when we're traveling musicians, when you're touring the world and you do this, you miss home. You miss your family. Ed, during the 90s, when Wolfgang was born, he was a family man. He loved that more than anything. And that's one of the coolest things about him. No matter what, his proudest achievement was Wolfgang. His son, and
sure,
his family life, and so not to be down on him. We've all talked, over the last couple months, talked about Ed so much, and but that it's just incredible stuff, and what a loss for the music world. And I think he had so much more to give us, but sadly, he was real sick.
Yeah. But when you let's go back to your beginning, because I know Ed was a huge influence when you started playing. What got you into playing guitar?
Yeah, well, it's 1978. Here it is, man, and I've said it 100 times, and I'll say it 100 more times. It was Kiss "Rock and Roll Over" was my first real introduction to hard rock. I remember it like yesterday. I was at my sister-in-law's house. My brothers are a couple years much older than I am, 10 and 13 years older. So I was tagging along with my older brother Mike, and I was at my sister. She was my brother's girlfriend at the time, 1978, before they were married in the early 80s. But I was at her house, man. I was snooping around, just trying to keep myself busy while they're running around doing whatever they're doing. And I looked in her brother's room, and I saw on the ground, I saw this album cover with 4 faces in a circle. And it was like something out of a movie, man. It was like glowing, the smoke was coming out of it saying, "Come to me, Steve, come to me." And I picked it up. It was Kiss, "Rock and Roll Over."
Nice.
And,
great album.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible. But I hadn't even heard it yet. So I picked it up. And then my sister-in-law, Marianne's brother, Paulie, walked in. And he said, "Steve," he used to call me Geek Man. He said, "Geek Man, take this record. This band's called Kiss. I think you're going to like it. They're huge, blah, blah, blah." And I took it home. I put it on my little, record player that I had, one of those little portable record players that you could take with you. I put it on, the beginning of "I Want You" starts, and I'm like, oh, this is nice. It kind of sounds like, the Beatles or Fleetwood Mac, "In the morning I raise my," and then all of a sudden, man, when that guitar kicked in and the drums and, Paul, "I want you." It was one of those things you see in these movies about the 70s where, like Marty McFly, when he got thrown, when he plugged in the guitar and got flown back. it was that powerful for me, and then I just was mesmerized from that moment on, and then listened to the rest of the record, Take Me, Calling Dr. Love especially, and that was where I kind of got scared, hearing the beginning of that, Gene's voice, and I was able to kind of associate the guys, and that was it, man. And then a couple months later, my neighbor up the street turned me on to Van Halen, and he said to me, he goes, "Hey, Steve, I heard you're really into Kiss now." He's like, "You got to hear this band. Gene Simmons discovered them, and they're called Van Halen." And I was like, "Man, what is a Van Halen?" And he gave me the 8-track tape of Van Halen 1, and I remember putting it in and listening to it and just going, "This is unbelievable." And then, of course, when I heard Eruption, much like a lot of other people in the world, first time hearing it, I didn't know what I was hearing. Like, I kind of knew it was an electric guitar. It sounded familiar, but by the time it got to the end, when Ed's doing the tapping part, I didn't know what I was hearing. Like, if I was hearing the craziest keyboard in the world, the like a violin, a video game. I didn't know what it was, but it it just hit me in my every part of my body, my brain, my legs, my arms, my eyes. Everything was just like taken over by this sound. And I think it was probably a week or two later, I told my mom and dad, I said, "I want to learn how to play guitar. You got to take me for guitar lessons." And they took me down to this local music store in Maywood, New Jersey, Musically Yours, signed me up for guitar lessons. And you're going to love this. This is a great story. So when I walked in, my mom walked me into this place, and we had to rent a guitar. So the guy behind the counter goes, "Mrs. Brown, is Steve a lefty or a righty?" And she goes, "Well, he's a lefty." And he said to my mother, he goes, "Well, it'll be cheaper if he learns how to play righty." And sure enough, I learned how to play righty.
So you're left-handed but play guitar right?
Yeah.
See, I'm the same way. I'm left-handed at everything except guitar.
Yeah, there you go. So, man, maybe your parents did the same thing to you. They were kind of like, again, it's cheaper to learn to play righty because, back then, especially in 1978, 79, they're, finding a left-handed guitar was not the easiest thing in the world.
I bet. So you picked up the guitar, and was there any music in your family prior to you playing guitar? Did anybody else play?
Not really. The only musical influence that I had before playing guitar was I would jam along with my grandfather. He played a little piano, and that was it. And I just remember being down at their house, and I would play. He taught me how to play chopsticks, and I would play along with him. He would play the bass, dun 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 dun. I'd play dun 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 dun. I'd play chopsticks, but that was it. Yeah, my family was athletes, my athletes and teachers. My dad was a, minor league baseball player who pitched against the 57 New York Yankees. He was on the Cincinnati Reds farm team back in the 50s. So, yeah, and that's it. And, so my oldest brother, Mike, was, a tremendous, football and baseball player. Ivy League dude. My middle brother, Chris, was a, fabulous artist. Unbelievably, he's a very famous famous interior designer. So I had kind of the artistic side of me, but it was never came out in the family musically. And, I think I certainly lit the fire pretty well with that in the Brown household.
Yeah. Were you an athlete also?
I was, man.
What was your sport?
Everything. Football, baseball, basketball. I mean, I would probably say baseball and football are my best sports. But I loved it all. BMX, bike riding, surfing, everything, man. I was just, I was one of those kids, man, where, especially during the summer, when I was young, I'd be out of the house from the moment I woke up till dinner time, whether it was riding bikes or playing football, playing baseball, but it certainly laid a good foundation for when I got into rock and roll, especially doing the Eddie Van Halen, Pete Townsend scissor kicks and jumping on stage. The athletic and the core stuff I developed early on certainly helped out with the stage presence.
Sure. So so how old were you at this time?
I was 9 years old, 1978. I'm 50 years old. So yeah,
Okay,
I was young.
So I could have sworn I saw there's something out there with you on stage with Ray Gillen, was it?
Yeah.
When you were around 12?
That's it. Yeah. 1984. I was, that was, so I'm letting my cat out right now. You hear my cat
Is
yelling
that your
at you?
cat?
Yeah. You going to go out or what? Go out. Go out. Go out. Go out. Oh, he's pissed.
Man.
Sorry, dude. Sorry
No
about
worries.
that.
Hey, we've had dogs on the show. Now we've got a cat on the show. So
Yeah. Yeah, the problem is he doesn't want to go outside because it's there's 2 feet of snow out there. He hates the snow.
I don't blame him.
So yeah, fast forward a couple years. So what happened? The Ray Gillen thing was my guitar teacher at the time. Was this guy Ross Barada, and he was in this band, a great New Jersey cover band called Harlot, with George Pagonis on drums, Mike Rubino, and this kid from Cliffside Park, New Jersey, Ray Gillen, was the lead singer. And they used to rehearse right across the street from Paramus High School, where we went to high school. And my first drummer, Mike Payne, used to cut George Pagonis' lawn at his house in Paramus, and we used to go and watch them rehearse in the garage. And it was my first experience as a kid, being around like a real rock band. I mean, these guys, these guys look like rock stars, I mean, you saw the pictures of Ray back in the early, Ray looked like, he was a rock god back then, and Ross, my guitar teacher, had long black hair. He was like the black haired Italian version of John Sykes.
Nice.
He was the Jersey Italian, totally. Now that, it's the first time I ever said that, but pretty wild. But, and that was a huge influence on me because I saw how a rock band, and I was jamming already with the kind of the infantile stages of what Trixter was to become. But I was playing at my buddies with my buddy Mike Payne in his garage, and me and him and my other buddy Doug on bass, and we were sort of jamming together. But I learned a lot from watching them. So they invited me and Mike, my friend Mike Payne, to come see them play at one of the clubs. And the drummer's parents drove Mike and I to the show, and I knew nothing about it, but I guess they planned. They were like, hey man, we're going to bring Steve up. And, the early mid 80s, 1983 or 1980, it was 1984. The rules were a little different. You could sneak kids in as long as the mom and dad were there watching and overseeing, making sure I wasn't doing shots of Jack Daniels and drinking beers. But it was one of the coolest experiences of my life. They called me up and brought me up on stage, and and that was my first time playing in front of an audience, and strapped on my guitar teacher's guitar and played You Really Got Me, the Van Halen version with them. And it was from that moment on, it was off to the races. And then right after that, I had already started Trixter by then, and we played our first shows that year in 1984. So, but, Ray Gillen and Ross and the Harlot band were a huge influence for me as far as learning how to be in a band and what to do and, what you do in rehearsal, how you kind of, sometimes you got to take one part of a song and keep going over it, all those you learn when you're in a band, but just really, really cool. And, and then we know, Ray went on to great things, sadly, with his sickness and, what happened to him. He wasn't able to reach his full potential, and it's a shame, but, great times, great memories with those guys.
Did he have the pipes back then?
Oh, dude, he was unbelievable. You can go on YouTube. He was unbelievable back then. And, right after that is when kind of, Ray was doing the Harlot thing, and he was kind of getting sought out by everybody. Right after he did Harlot, he joined Bobby Rondinelli's band with his brother Teddy. They had a band called Rondinelli. And that was the band that kind of threw him in. That's how the word started getting around in the big circles. That's how Tony Iommi found out about him. And I think Rudy Sarzo was the guy who got Ray the Black Sabbath gig. But Ray just was a superstar, man. He had it all. Unfortunately, he didn't get the breaks, that I think he would deserve. But
Sure.
but at least we have some great records from. I love the Badlands records. It's funny. I'm looking at it right now. I got the first Badlands CD sitting in front of me.
That's a
And,
great album right there. We had Greg Chase on last week, and
Sure.
yeah, and then I saw the picture of you with Ray Gillen, and I was like, coincidence.
Yeah, Jersey guy, and what's cool right now is I've actually been working on some unreleased. I have some unreleased Ray Gillen songs that he did with one of my best friends, the guy who produced the first couple Trixter demo tapes, a guy named John Chrissy.
Mm-hmm.
He did a couple songs, and a couple of those were the songs that Ray used to audition for Black Sabbath. He sent those to Tony. And so we transferred the analog tapes, and I've built up some kind of modern sounding tracks along that. So hopefully in the next couple of years I'll get those released. I'm trying to get some of Ray's old buddies to play on it, and some of the old guys from different famous bands. I'm not going to mention any names,
Sure.
but kind of the guys that were all associated with Ray. But it's unbelievable stuff. Really, really great, and just hearing Ray singing into a 57 mic, he could make just a basic live microphone sound incredible.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So during this time, you said you had Trixter going. You started Trixter with? Was it Pete?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I started Trixter on my own. Pete wasn't even a singer when I met him.
Okay.
And started talking about it. It was kind of like this. I looked at Pete. He was like 4 years older than me, and he was one of the best looking guys in town. And I knew I would talk to him on the phone because he was such a big Van Halen fan, Judas Priest in Boston. And I could just tell by the talking to him, I could tell by the tone of his voice. And I said to him one day, I said, "Man, why don't you be my singer?" And he was like, "All right, I'll give it a shot." And, I was already singing at that point, singing and writing songs. So I kind of taught him how to sing. And we actually Ray hooked him up with his singing teacher, this great singing teacher, Bob Fitzgerald, who was in the New Jersey area back in the day. And and that's how it started, man. Summer of 1983 is when we had our first sort of rehearsals. And by mid 1984, Trixter was sort of off to the races.
Mm-hmm. Now, so you got Pete, and then you got Gus, and then PJ came in, right?
Yeah. We had the original drummer was a guy named, like I told you, my buddy Mike Payne.
Mm-hmm.
And the Cowie was the original bass player, and it was just one of those things. As time, a couple months went on, it was kind of, I knew what I wanted to do with the rest of my life since 1978. I knew that I wanted to be a rock guitar player, musician, songwriter, all of it. I was, like I say, I sold my soul to rock and roll, and I'm running with the devil forever. So, yeah. That was my thing. And so certain guys, you either have it or you don't. And it's like, man, if you want to go to, wrestling practice or football practice instead of rehearse with the band, then we got to move on. So
Sure.
That's kind of what happened, man. And we finally got the lineup together that became the original, the original Trixter lineup, and it worked out pretty well.
Yeah. I mean, that first album was a killer album that you guys put out. And you guys were pretty young when that came out.
We were.
Yeah. I mean, were you like surprised how? I don't want to say surprised, but were you like? I mean, what were you thinking when it came out and you were 19 years old or however you were?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's every musician's dream, and it was what we've worked for, what I worked for, writing songs, and look, man, at that time. Everything was attainable. You know what I mean? In the 80s, our style of music was king, and it was real. And, and of course, with the success of Bon Jovi, our friends, and John Bon Jovi was the first guy who helped Trixter out. He was the first guy who got our first demo tape and called us and said, you guys got a lot of potential. He introduced us to the Skid Row guys. We were right behind them, so it was, yeah. I mean, I can't say I was looking back on it. It's the most incredible thing in the world, looking back at, 20, 30 years later, 35 years later, the whole thing is just mind blowing. It's a movie that I lived and that we lived. And, but at the time, I got to tell you, man, this is what we did. We lived for it. You didn't think about it. It was like, all right, Bon Jovi's the biggest band in the world. Skid Row's next. And you know what? We're going to be next. And that's kind of the way it worked. And we were just so driven. And this is all we did. We used to rehearse at my mom and dad's house, every day. We did this like a full-time job, and it was kind of all or nothing. And luckily for us, we were unique enough to where, we had something special. We weren't Bon Jovi. We weren't Skid Row. We weren't Def Leppard. We weren't Poison. We were Trixter. And, for better or worse, like I always say, we were rough around the edges in certain aspects, but, we made up for it in heart and soul and energy and youthful, because when we came out, it was kind of the people were sliding down the mountain, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
The clock was ticking on it. And we were one of the last bands, with us and Firehouse, we were like the last two bands that, broke through. So I'm just so thankful that we came out when we did, and that
you got in there.
Yeah, if we would have came out a year later, it would have been a whole different story, and we got in, at the tail end of, the great MTV era, and we were made for it. Look, man, I when I started the band, I knew very early on, being such influenced by Kiss and all the great bands of the 80s, whether it was Motley, Bon Jovi, Def Leppard, Van Halen. Look, you can go on and on about the music all you want, but the image was also a huge part of it. And, let's be real. Everybody that loves the Beatles and they were the greatest songwriters, let's not forget that they started out, they were just like Elvis. It was all about the girls. And those guys were great looking guys. They wrote great songs. Of course. But it's the image, and it's how that image, the Stones, the same thing, man. And then go to the 70s. Would Led Zeppelin be as popular as they were, one of the greatest bands ever, had Jimmy Page and Robert Plant not look like rock gods? No.
Right.
No. Would Van Halen be what they are if they looked like, I don't want to mention any names, but dude, look, man, David Lee Roth and Eddie were two of the greatest looking rock stars ever. I mean, I say this, I really want to I want to talk to, Wolfgang and the Van Halen camp. I think the definition of guitar hero should be in the dictionary, and it should have Ed Van Halen's picture. That is the quintessential guitar hero. I don't care who you think is maybe better than him, or his look, his playing, everything about him is the ultimate guitar hero, bar none. But, getting back to the whole time period, it was all that complete package. And Trixter, we were, again, that whole marketing thing, and knowing what I know now about, and what I knew even back then about the way the business worked.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Well, that whole time, I mean, your look, a lot of times had more to do for your success than the music did, I thought. Because there's a lot of bands that had some hits, but I wouldn't say their music was all that great. And if they didn't look cool or look the way they did, I don't know if it would have,
Who would you say? What bands had success?
Well,
or had?
I don't want to get in because a lot of them were, I would remember seeing them on MTV, and then they would have a song and then be done. I don't know. Steve.
And the real band. So who are you going to say? You're going to say Motley Crue? I mean, Motley Crue still had great songs.
No, Motley was one of my favorite bands.
Yeah. So Motley Crue, great songs, great look. Bon Jovi, possibly the greatest look, guitar player, the two best looking guys at the time. You know what I mean? Great, phenomenal songs. Def Leppard, probably the best song. Photograph, I say it all the time, is the top hard pop metal, the greatest pop metal song ever written. Without Photograph, there would be no Living on a Prayer, guaranteed. It is the most important song in pop metal history, Photograph. Production wise, everything else that came after it was influenced by that. Mutt Lange and Def Leppard, that song. What other band? Poison, The Image was great. They have phenomenal image, over the top, but great songs. You can't deny it. So I don't know any band that had real success. I mean, there are a lot of bands, and could say that about Trixter, that we were a C level band, and I get that, but still we had some great songs. One in a Million, great pop song. It should have been a lot bigger than it was, but sadly we weren't on Geffen Records. We were on MCA Records. But
I don't know. There was some bands. I mean, I don't know. Pretty Boy Floyd.
Yeah, but they didn't have real hits, real songs, I mean, I'm not saying that, look, man, we can get into the other tier of bands. I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
I'm talking about the main bands. I mean, dude, listen, 60s, 70s, there's 20 Beatle clones, there's 20 Led Zeppelin clones. We could go down the line on every genre of, bands. But I mean, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
I could go, I've studied this. I could go through every band from the 80s and every band that people say, oh, they should have been bigger. And I could tell you why they weren't. As a lot of people could. You ask Eddie Trunk, he'll give you an exact, reason why a certain band didn't. And it's all, look, man, we all know it's a whole bunch of things. It's the songs, it's the image, it's your manager, it's your booking agent, the breaks you get. And at the end of the day, it's the fans. And, the fans are the ones who they can sense always what's real and what's not. And I think that, the bands that had the success, the fans loved it, and they speak louder than anything, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who buy the t-shirts and buy the tickets, support everything. And they're the ones that got it on, to be on MTV and got it to be on the radio. And,
did you guys take off on radio or MTV first?
No, it was all about, back then it was all about radio first. And so when we released the first record in May of, the end of May of 1990, Line of Fire was the first, because it was the radio thing. You got to go with a rock track. You got to go with a, I don't know what they called it, just a rock, got to go to rock radio.
Was that a single?
Yeah, well, it was a rock radio single.
Okay.
So I don't know. Yeah, it wasn't the full push that like Give It to Me Good got, but it was and there was also, I don't know if you remember, but do you remember Z-Rock back in the day?
I do.
AM radio. So that was the thing that kind of, I remember that, hearing it on AM radio, which was really weird and cool at the same time. Cause, being grown up in the 70s, hearing AM radio was so, that was the soundtrack of our lives.
Yeah.
You'd hear Kiss, and you'd hear Styx and Fleetwood Mac and, Frank Sinatra all on the same station. So, we just, started out with Line of Fire, and then Give It to Me Good. We shot the video for Give It to Me Good in June of 1990, and started, MCA was like, we're going to go with this, and we got to get X amount of stations. It's got to be like a rock radio hit before MTV's going to add it. And it took, a good 2.5 months. Working radio. We were doing like radio shows and stuff like that. And, and then by September, by late September of 1990, we're out on tour with Striper. They were on Against the Law tour, and we got to go out on tour with them, and they got the call. MTV added your is going to add your video, and you're going to get in rotation, and and we got in, we got played at night, and then a week later we got added during the day, and then they added us to the whatever dial MTV was, and I think we debuted at number 8 one day, and then the next day we were number 1, and Give It To Me Good was number 1 on MTV for 13 weeks straight.
Yeah, I remember that fucking video was on all the time.
Yeah, man, it was kind of annoying, but just an unbelievable time. And, I remember it like yesterday. We were playing, I think we were in Columbus, Ohio, which, of course, for bands like us, back in the day, the Midwestern, Florida was a huge thing, huge market for us, and Ohio. So it was like Ohio was the Midwest where, all the bands broke out of, like Kiss did and Van Halen. They all broke out of the Midwest because that's where, rock and roll was created. And I remember Pete walking into the dressing room. I'm warming up. We're going out, about to go out on stage. He goes, dude, the video's number 1. And I was just like, holy shit, man.
You had to be thinking, we have made it. You're on tour. Your video's number 1.
It was one of the greatest feelings in the world, man. And it was, I got to tell you, it was really cool because you saw the power of it, to where all of a sudden, we're gaining momentum. We're out on tour with Striper, and then all of a sudden we're starting to sell more T-shirts than they are. We're selling, 5,000 records a week, 10,000 records a week. Then we go out on tour with Don Dokken, who had, he had left Dokken and did his solo thing. We went out with them, and pretty much, we were the headliner, we were number 1 and, packing everywhere we were playing, and we were selling, at that time we were probably selling 10, 15,000 records a week. It started going haywire. Nice. And, you could see it in the crowd, and it was just, it was really cool. And the Striper guys were so great to us, kind of basically just going, hey man, enjoy every moment of this. You never know when it's going to go away. And Don Dokken, Uncle Don, as we always called him.
Uncle Don.
Uncle Don, he would give us advice and tell us, it was great, man. It was just, we were living it, and it's just some of the most magical times of our lives. And, for me especially, it was just like, wow, these songs that I wrote in my mom and dad's house and in their basement, here they are, lighting the world. It was just, it was a great time. And, again, what we were talking about before, the timing of it, we were, at the tail end of it. And, sadly, I don't think anybody realized that, 1990, 91 would kind of be the end of it, for that 80s hard rock.
Yeah. Do you remember the first song you wrote?
The first song I wrote, it's funny you say that because I was thinking about some of that today. One of the first songs I wrote, the one I know it's called Mistress, and it was basically a ripoff of Making Love by Kiss, but I played it more, you know how Paul played at the beginning of Making Love. It was like power chords, kind of like Whole Lot of Love, sort of along those lines. So I played it more, I played the same, I think it was in E, but I played it more like if Eddie played it, where it was like single riff, almost like Mean Street.
Okay.
And it was like that. And I remember, man, Pete sang it, it was like, you're a mistress of the day and a mistress of the night. And it was very like, from what I remember, it was very much Judas Priest, kind of like, it sounded like to me, where I remember, it was like Judas Priest meets Van Halen. And that was it. And then the second song I remember we did it when we played this at our second Trixter show that we ever did. Actually, the first official Trixter show we ever did. We played it an outdoor concert in Paramus, New Jersey at the band shell. And we played this other song that I wrote called Do You Know What Love Is, which turned into a song called Love Ain't No Game, which turned into Play Rough on the first Trixter record.
Okay. So is that the first, the oldest song you've written that made it to the Trixter?
Yeah,
okay.
definitely. parts of that. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
definitely say that's funny that you asked that, because I was thinking about that today, and that's, kind of had that same. It was in F sharp minor, dun 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 dun, and it had some of the riffs and some of the things that were in Play Rough. That wound up being, and that's, man, that you look at. I'm a huge, as Van Halen fan, and, we know the stories. I think anybody who's a fan of it knows the early days, how, some of the early songs turned into other songs. They would parts of this, and how Mean Street used to be called Voodoo Queen back in the club days in 1975, 76 when they wrote it, and it didn't, it took years for them to finally release that song. So I'm glad, man, and that was something that continued on as a songwriter. There were parts of a lot of the old songs that became songs that were on the first album, or even things that were on here,
Mm-hmm.
And one of the funniest things is on my new band, Tokyo Motor Fist, there's a song called Sedona.
Uh-huh.
That's on the record, and really cool tune, kind of Van Halen, Toto. We got Mark Rivera from Billy Joel's band playing sax on it, but the guitar riff, dun, 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 I wrote that right after we got done with the first Trixter record, and I would play it every day at sound check. It was like my warm-up thing. And it was supposed to be a Trixter song, but here it is, 30 years later, it finally makes a record. So
That's awesome.
I'm always good, man. I've always been good at cataloging the ideas. And I always had one of those micro cassette recorders with me back in the day. And anytime I came up with an idea, a song, I would always have it. And I actually still have a lot of those micro cassettes. I've been, during this pandemic, I don't know if you saw some of my posts online, but I've been, digitizing all the old analog tapes, and just what I told you, like the Ray Gillen stuff, the first Trixter recordings, all that stuff. So, there's a lot of that, involved, to where, just because a song wasn't right then doesn't mean it can't be right now, if you know what I mean. There's a cool parts. And we did that with the other Trixter song, Rockin' to the Edge of the Night. That was one of the songs that was on one of the original demos that got us our record deal. And what's really cool about that is that the demo was produced by George Draculius, who went on to big fame he was the guy who signed and produced the Black Crowes. He produced our demo tape that kind of got us signed.
Okay.
And so there was a version of Rockin' to the Edge of the Night that was on it. And for some reason, it didn't make the first record, which was it would have been the most obvious song, but, it wasn't right. It didn't make here, but it made, Human Era. And we, changed it around a bit, dropped the key down, and it's a great song, and I'm so happy, so I'm glad that, I learned that years ago. I think, guys like John Bon Jovi and Richie Sambora, Phil and Joe from Leppard, they would always say, keep parts of songs, use parts, especially with Def Leppard. That's the way those guys wrote, working with Mutt, that they would have, they would each write songs, and Mutt would say, we're going to use that bridge from this song. We're going to take that verse from this song. And all of a sudden you'd have 3 of their songs deconstructed into a brand new one. So I learned that early on, never to be, so attached to one idea.
Sure. Now, on your first album, you had other writers on there also, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Bill Ray and Jim Ray, who, were the producers. Bill Ray, he helped. They were more song doctoring,
Okay.
if you will. But yeah, enough to where, 1 in a Million wouldn't be the song it was hadn't it not been for Bill and Jim Ray. They added some really important touches to it. But the basis of it was all mine as the original, the verse, pre-chorus and chorus.
Sure.
With different production things and the riff. The original version of 1 in a Million didn't have the, the down and the sort of photograph intro that it has. That was Jim Ray's idea. He really helped me and him really came up with that whole guitar sort of thing. And, I'm grateful for that. And again, that was part of the time back then. I worked with a lot of great songwriters, a very dear friend of mine, Jack Ponte, who's a kind of a New Jersey rock legend. He wrote a couple songs with Bon Jovi. He basically gave John his start. He was in that band, The Rest with John Bon Jovi, and so Jack was a huge influence, taught me so much about writing. I wrote a song with Mick, God, I forget his name, the guy who wrote Kiss Me Deadly with Lita Ford. I was doing the whole thing that a lot of band guys, when you get like a record deal, they say, all right, we want you to write. It was that whole Desmond Child thing, and we want song doctors. Everybody was doing it. Aerosmith was working with Jim Valance. So I was working with a lot of kind of the smaller guys, but just what I learned from everybody was so valuable. And things that I still, Jack Ponte taught me, how to create the big vocal harmonies. That he learned that from Mutt Lange, and working with those guys. So, I was just so into all of it. I really, as soon as we started making the first record, I fell in love with the studio and producing and being involved with, every aspect. Why are you using this mic on the guitar? What kind of tape are we using? What kind of board? Why are we not using an API board when we're using an SSL? All that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
After the first Trixter record, I became obsessed with wanting to become, basically my lifelong, passion has to become Mutt Lange, in that sense of, being a writer, singer, producer, all of it. And, I have fun with it. And, it's kind of the beauty of having my own home studio. I get to kind of, pretend that I am sort of a mini Mutt Lange, if you will.
Yeah, right.
I'm trying my best.
You had more input on here as far as that producing and that kind of stuff than the first album, correct?
Yes. Oh yeah. Well, again, that's where, as soon as we took off, I became obsessed with learning about, I was more obsessed with Bob Rock, Bruce Fairbairn, Mutt Lange, Mike Shipley, Nigel Green, Ted Templeman, Don Landy. I was more into producers and engineers than I could care less about guitar playing at that point. I was just so into all of, the new technology and, I love it. Again, it's one of those things, as much as I love touring and playing live, I love being in the studio just as much.
Yeah. I'm more of a studio guy. I like to be in the studio. I mean, I love to play live, but I like the studio if I had to pick one.
Yeah, it's hey
fun.
Man, it's whatever. It works for everybody, but it's a great thing. And the greatest lesson I learned for it, from Ed Van Halen, which was funny because when I first bought my house in 1993, after coming off the road from here and the success, and my accountant said, dude, you got to buy a house or else you're gonna have to fucking spend a shitload of money on taxes, blah blah blah. So I bought this house that I've been living in. My wife and I've been here for 28 years. And the first order of business was when I walked inside, I saw it. I'm like, yeah, this is cool. I go to the owners. I go, where's the basement? I walked down in the basement and I saw that there was a door that goes right to the garage. I'm like, this is perfect.
You were looking for your studio.
For my studio, and that was the first order of business. And a week later, when I moved into the house, I went and I was hanging with Van Halen up in Connecticut at one of their shows on the '93 tour. And I told Ed, I go, yeah, man, I'm building my studio. And he goes, no, he goes, what are you building? You building a demo studio to do demos? I'm like, fuck no, man. I'm like, dude, I got 24 tracks, digital machines. I got an analog 8-track. I go, man. I said, dude, you got 5150. I'm building my own studio and I'm calling it 6160. And he backed up, man. He's like, awesome. We were laughing about that, but it's been the greatest investment that I ever made in my life. Instead of buying a Ferrari or buying a car or buying other stupid things, vintage guitars, I built a recording studio, and we, over the last 30 years, 28 years, I've been making records here. And it's just been the greatest, investment and learning educational thing that I've ever done in my life.
Yeah. You bring other people in your studio too? Like, did
I do.
PJ come over there?
Yeah, we do. PJ, has done a couple songs from his last 2 solo records here. And, we did after Trixter, we had a bunch of different projects, 40-foot Ringo, stereo, all out, Soak, Throwing Rocks. So I'm in the process of trying to get all that stuff ready for release. But, it's, as you know, being a studio guy, it's a mammoth undertaking. And then I'm still doing jobs for other people, producing, engineering and mixing and mastering stuff. So it's like, it's never ending, and the learning is never, the education, and every day it's some new thing, and I just love it, man. I'm just so, I just got a brand new PC. I switched over from Mac to PC. I got a supercharged studio, Pro Tools computer, and it's the greatest thing in the world. The amount of power that I have, and not have to worry about your computer choking up, getting, I don't know if you're an Apple or PC guy, but on Apple, when you use too many plugins, you get the spinning wheel of doom.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh shit, and Pro Tools crashes, and so I don't have that problem anymore, and I'm really thankful of that. But it's just, dude, I don't know how, I don't know what you're into with the digital audio and Pro Tools, but I'm just obsessed with it, and I just love the power and being able to make hysteria quality records in your house nowadays. And
well, I'm not quite up to that level, but I use Cubase. I don't know if you've ever messed in Cubase.
I love Bruno Ravel, my dear friend, and one of the most talented engineers and producers that I know. That's what he uses. He loves Cubase.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, that came with my my interface. So that's just what I used.
Good,
but it's fun. It's fun. I have a good time. I suck at mixing, though. I'll tell you that.
Well, you'll get it. Just keep learning everything. The cool thing nowadays, bro, with music business and anything in life, anything you want to learn, anything you need to fix, it's all on YouTube.
Yeah,
I kid you not, man. Everything in the world. It amazes me. I show my 85-year-old father. My dad's in great shape. He's an, iPhone guy and, computer and, with the Netflix and the smart TVs and, anything. I just show him and I go, Dad, you got to see this. You want to learn how to, how to fix, basically rebuild your car. You can do it.
Right.
Man, and let alone the music stuff is just never ending. I mean, that's why the level of guitar playing nowadays and for the last 10 years has gone through the roof, because any kid, you want to learn anything, it's right there. There's 20 lessons on how to play Mean Street or how to play I'm the One. Man, when I was a kid, or I don't know how old you are, but when we were kids, to learn Van Halen stuff, you had to slow down the record player, or if you were lucky enough to have a 4-track, you could put the cassette in a 4-track and slow it down and sort of figure it out that way. But man, nowadays, it's just mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. I think I'm about the same age. I'm approaching 50. I'm almost 50.
There you go. You'll be in the club soon.
Yeah,
man.
I'm almost there. But I remember, putting on my cassette tapes, and if you push the play button down on some of the stereos, if you just push it down a little bit, it would start to play. So I would play it. I wouldn't push it all the way down. I would just play it so it would go slow, so I could hear what was going on. But yeah, good times back then.
Oh, yeah. But again, what I was saying about technology and, the studio and what you're able to do, and for me, doing the last Tokyo Motor Fist record, I was out on tour doing this thing called the Wizards of Winter, which is kind of like a smaller version of TSO.
Yeah.
I was out with Greg Smith, my bass player in Tokyo Motor Fist, and we were finishing up the record. And literally, man, I would set up. I have a mobile rig, a little Pro Tools rig on my laptop, and I have speakers. We were cutting bass tracks and guitar tracks, and I was doing background vocals and editing on the tour bus.
Mm-hmm.
And hotel rooms, and it's stuff that's on the record. I mean, I'm just so thankful that we have this technology, and everybody who complains about it, I think it's I think it's more what you do with it, and at the end of the day, I'm still a believer. No matter what, we all know how you can fix vocals, you can fix this, you can fix that. I'm still a believer. You still got to be able to play. You still got to be able to sing. You use the technology to help you, whatever you need. But at the end of the day, for me, I'm still old school in the sense of I like to get great performances, and I like it to be as real as possible.
Yeah, yeah. So let's get back to Trixter. We got off on a little recording conversation, but
yeah.
I love it. Let's get back to Trixter with. So you were with Striper, and then you guys ended up on tour with Firehouse and Warrant, right? Blood, Sweat, and Beer Store.
Yeah, well, that was after. So after Striper and Don Doc, and then we went out with Poison. That was our first arena tour that we ever did with Poison and Slaughter on the Flesh and Blood tour. We did like 5 or 6 shows with them, and then we went out with the Scorpions on the Crazy World tour for 5 months. And I
saw that show. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So that was the real deal, right there. And that's all we ever wanted to do with Trixter. Like, making records was secondary. All we ever wanted to do from the moment we started the band was play arenas, and most importantly, play the Meadowlands Arena in New Jersey, which was our hometown arena, where we saw, Van Halen, we saw Kiss, we saw Bon Jovi, we saw Def Leppard, all of our band. That was the dream. And, lo and behold, in April of 1991, we got to play, our hometown arena, get our gold records presented to us there, just like Bon Jovi did a couple years earlier. We were there watching, when Bon Jovi was on tour opening up for Rat in 1985. They got their gold records there that night, and a bunch of the Bon Jovi guys were out at the show hanging with us and stuff.
You got that on film?
We do. We have some of that on film. We do. We certainly have. Yeah. The Tesla guys were there. Bullet Boys. It was awesome. One of the funniest things about that night, backstage at the Meadowlands, we had this huge party afterwards and stuff. The Scorpions and Trixter celebrating. And Tom Araya from Slayer came.
Yeah.
And it was like, I think PJ got a picture with him, and it's like, man, talk about if that's not two worlds colliding, the blonde bass player Trixter, the happy, smiling, young band getting a picture with basically, heavy metal incarnate right there, Tom Araya, who's one of the nicest guys in the world, I love Tom, and he's such a cool dude, but it's just kind of funny. But that was a night, man. Yeah, we do have a lot of footage from that. I was actually looking at some of the stuff. MTV did a Week in Rock report on that show, so they got some great pro footage that I have from that's unreleased and whatnot. But great times, man. As Dennis DeYoung wrote, the best of times.
There you go. So when you first played the arena and the lights go out and you're hearing that crowd for your first time, I mean, you had to get goosebumps or something?
Joe, it was the culmination of all the hard work, and it was every dream coming true at that moment. You know what I mean? Because like I told you, as much as we loved going out to California to make the first record, and living out there, meeting David Lee Roth and Slash and all the rock stars hanging out at the Rainbow and whatnot, nothing compares to playing arenas when you grew up on that and seeing, again, my first 2 concerts, Kiss at Madison Square Garden 1979, Van Halen at Madison Square Garden on the Diver Down tour. And that's all I ever wanted to do. And then here we are, we're doing it. We're playing sold out arenas with Poison and Slaughter. And then we jump on to sold out arenas multiple nights with the Scorpions, and it was just incredible. And the coolest thing about it for us was we weren't a buy-on band. We were a band that meant something. We were number one on MTV. We were selling 10 and 20,000 records a week. We meant something. When we were on the Poison tour, we helped sell tickets. When we were on the Scorpions tour, we helped sell a lot of tickets, you know, and in some markets, we were getting close to them in t-shirt sales. And it was just incredible, man. It was just, we loved every moment of it, from waking up on the tour bus to, you know, showering in the, you know, in the sort of, you know, the, you know, basketball player or hockey players' dressing rooms. Right. I mean, we lived at the arenas. We wouldn't get hotels on show days. We would sleep in the bus, wake up, and basically live at the arena. So it was cool, man. We were hanging out with all the crew guys and all the bands, and, you know, and a lot of the guys we're still friends with to this day. You know, some of those guys who were out Scorpions tour, Poison, still great friends. You know, Poison's tour manager at the time was this guy Scotty Ross, who went on to be Van Halen's tour manager, and I was just with him. He's Journey's tour manager now, and when I was out in 2018 with Def Leppard and Journey, he was out with me, and we're like cracking up, just going, here we are, man, 30 years later, we're still kicking ass.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
When you did the Warrant Firehouse tour, you almost went out with David Lee Roth, is that correct?
It is correct. And that was, I got to tell you, that was one of the hardest things for me personally to turn away, because it was like, man, David Lee Roth wants us to come out on tour. And it was hard, very hard saying no to that. But we all knew that the Warrant tour was going to be a better deal for us. Mm-hmm. And it was going to be better, a better, I don't know how to say it. We just had more faith in that tour. And
I think you guys in Firehouse and Warrant were, I mean, especially you and Firehouse were coming up, right? Like you weren't at your peak yet.
Well, I mean, looking back on it, we were, because that was sadly a year later, we didn't have any, there was no more peak.
But I mean, what I mean by that though, like David Lee Roth was, I mean, not falling, but he wasn't at the top anymore, like the Warrant Firehouse Trixter tour would have been.
Totally. You're totally right about that. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that Dave put out that record, A Little Ain't Enough, and it didn't light the world on fire as much as I loved the record, and me and Pete especially were like, dude, how are we going to turn down David Lee Roth? But, we knew the Warrant guys, and we sort of knew the Firehouse guys. We just knew that age-wise, we knew that there was something special. We did not know how big it was going to be and how successful that tour was going to be, and how much fun it was going to be. I mean, it was like, and I don't know if you've heard some of the other interviews that we've done, talking about that tour, but it was probably the most fun I think any three rock bands have ever had, in their lives. Because what was so cool about it is I think all three bands, we were kind of close in age, and we got along. We were all like brothers immediately. And it was just so cool. We would ride on each other's tour buses. It was never any weirdness. It was just nonstop mania.
That had to be a blast.
Oh, dude, that's an understatement. It was crazy, man. Those Warrant dudes taught us how to party. That's for sure, man. When we came off the road from that, man, I needed to detox for a couple weeks, liver back in shape.
I could imagine. Jeez.
But some of the, and what's even cooler, bro, is that we're still great friends with all those guys. I wish Janie was still here with us, but with the Warrant guys, we're still tight as hell. And we've done shows with Warrant and Firehouse, plenty of festivals over the last, 10 years or whatnot. And the first time we all got back together, it was like 1991 again. Like nothing's changed. Because those guys were so level-headed and we were so level-headed, the Firehouse guys, it was just awesome. And it's great to still have friends like that, because, we did things together that no one else will ever do again. And we get to kind of share those memories where we look at each other and just kind of chuckle and go, man, that was some crazy times.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So after that tour, everybody knows what happened in the music scene. as far as the changing of the guards. But you came out, how far after that was 40-foot Ringo? Was that far away, or, I mean, what did you do right after that?
Yeah, right after Trixter, we came off, we had the Here record, which we signed a huge renegotiation deal with MCA, and, we got a lot of money and made a great, phenomenal record. We worked with Jimbo Barton and made Here, which was a phenomenal record. I put everything I had, in the band. We put everything we had into making that record. And we had no idea, honestly, what was going on around us, musically, because we were in our own bubble and we were working at the best recording studios in New York and LA and Philly, and we were making this great record. And we got the Kiss Revenge tour, and we thought everything was just going to continue on. And, I remember it like the second week of the Kiss tour in October of 1992 when our manager called me and said, "Dude, I got bad news. MTV's not adding your video. They're changing everything. They're not playing, hard rock anymore." And that was a tough pill to swallow, but, we did it, and we wound up touring for the next 10 months, trying our best to support Here. Came home, and basically I started reinventing the wheel. I was like, I'm only 24 years old. I gotta think of something new. So PJ and I started this thing. I started this band with PJ called Throwing Rocks, which was complete 180 from Trixter. I wasn't really even playing guitar. I was singing, doing it was kind of like Oasis, Black Crowes, Beatles.
Is that stuff out there?
There's one song that's on YouTube. I am going to release it hopefully by the end of the year. We're going to do a real, package, real, nice thing, kind of like a big booklet, and really tell the story of it. But it's
nice.
It's phenomenal material. Yeah, Throwing Rocks, and then Throwing Rocks turned into Soaked, which Soaked turned into 40-foot Ringo, which was, out of all the bands after Trixter, that was the one that had the real shot, and we almost got signed to Sony. Actually, coincidentally, the guy who signed Firehouse almost signed 40-foot Ringo. So funny would that?
What happened? Why didn't they?
Man, I couldn't tell you, but It was so close, and it was just one of those things, with any band and anybody who's ever gotten a major label deal, I think they could tell you the story where there are so many bands who are great or good, and they get to that, we're almost to the top of the mountain. And when somebody says they're going to sign you, to actually get the record deal and get the contract and get the advance and get to make a record is a whole nother mountain you have to climb.
Sure.
So there's a lot of things that are involved, and it just didn't work out. And so we wound up signing an indie deal with, this great European label, Atenzia, who put out the record, and, some Japanese labels. But it was kind of, it was a bummer, man, because 40-foot Ringo, I think if we would have been given the major label shot, we would have been, right in there with Lit, with Butch Walker, Marvelous 3, all that stuff. And, but it is what it is. And then, I got to be honest with you, man, there was also, we had to deal with the stigma thing, which is, oh man, it's Steve and PJ from Trixter, and that was always one of the obstacles anybody has to deal with once you're in a successful band. It's very hard to reinvent yourself as something else.
You think that held you back a little bit?
I definitely do, because I know that was, and believe me, it happened numerous times where A&R guys said, "Dude, listen, man, I love your band, I love you, but I can't sign the guys from Trixter. I got to sign somebody, I got to sign somebody young who doesn't have baggage." And I was like, wow, guys, shit, man, we sold 1 million records. We got fans. That's baggage.
Right. You think that'd be a plus?
Nah, it's just, sadly, that's the way the A&R guys think. And, there's a lot riding on it. And I understand it. It's cool. And, look, man, at the end of the day, money was never a motivating factor for me. Since I was a little kid, it was always about the love of music and creating and songwriting and playing and recording and playing live. All of it is what I love to do. So,
I get that vibe from you. I can see that.
Yeah, I mean that's what it is, and believe me, dude, I've gone through the serious. It's a really hard time right now when you're a songwriter, and especially a songwriter who's had some success, and you know, it's tens of millions of streams, and you get your royalty statement, you look at it, and you go, "Holy shit, it's true! I'm
Yeah.
only making 4% of a penny per stream."
Yeah.
It's really, when you say like you're giving it away for free, you practically are.
Yeah. Yeah. I
But
mean, I have some stuff out there too, and get paid from streams, and like you said, it's nothing, especially for somebody like me that didn't have the success that you had. It might as well not give me anything. You know what I mean?
but again, and I tell this to I have parents who ask me advice, friends, about their kids who are musicians and want to be. The only thing I tell them is I said, do what I do, or do like PJs like that. You make music because you love it. You want
That's
to
right.
play guitar because you love it. Don't worry about making $1 million. Don't even think about that, because the odds of you doing it are slim to none.
That's right.
It was. I wrote the song "1 in a Million." It was 1 in a million back in 1988. Now it's like 1 in fucking a billion, especially with rock bands.
Yeah.
I think it's different if you're like, I mean, I've been researching, like the EDM stuff,
Mhm.
and there are EDM guys like that I don't even know of, and these guys have gotten like 50 billion streams.
Yeah. Yeah.
Making real money, and I go, who is this? Who's listening to this music? I mean, again, man, that's me being old, and I'm trying. I'm using the pandemic to get better at the social media and the streaming, and I'm still trying to get my YouTube shit squared away. So, hey, man, it's one of those things to where you just got to keep, as I say, keep the faith. I believe within the next 10 years, the whole Spotify thing, and I believe the Congress, let's hope, the legislation and the big wigs in the music biz, they're finally going to turn it around and kind of say, man, we got to do what's right here. The Spotify guy's a multi-billionaire. We got to at least get this streaming rate to a rate where songwriters and bands and musicians are making a fair royalty.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess we'll see, right?
Yeah, well, hey, man, well, like I said, keep the faith, and let's hope. But again, make music. Like I tell everybody listening, if you're a musician, make music because you love to make music, not because you want to make $1 million, and not because you want to, go out on the road and, date Instagram models.
Instagram models.
Well, because back in the day, it was like you wanted to date a Playboy model, but nowadays it's all about an Instagram model.
It's funny you say that, because I never thought of it like that, but that's funny.
Right?
So you did 40-foot Ringo, and you got Tokyo Motor Fist going now, which you've had for a little bit, right?
Yeah, I've had Tokyo Motor Fist going for the last, 5 years or 6 years or whatnot. When we put that together, Frontiers Records, that's one of the, Frontiers Records super groups that they, came to me with. And, it was an obvious choice. Bruno and Paul Lane have the Defiance. So they were like, hey, what if we put Steve and Ted together? Ted and I grew up together, in northern New Jersey. I've known Ted since I was a little kid, and it made absolute sense. And we put together a great band, Chuck Berge on drums and Greg Smith on bass. And, here we are. We released our second record, the beginning of, right in the middle of the pandemic, in 2020. And, I don't know, man, it's tough, but we made a great record, and I love playing with the band. Right before the pandemic broke out, we were on the Monsters of Rock cruise.
Mm-hmm.
We did 2 great shows on that, and, it's a phenomenal, fun band. And, if you're a fan of, Trixter, Danger, Def Leppard, Bon Jovi, Van Halen, here's a great band for you.
Yeah, it's a great melodic rock record. I listened to it, and I liked it. It's a good album.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. But let me ask you this, though. Why did you decide to go forward with the release right in the middle of the pandemic?
Wasn't up to us. It was Frontiers.
Okay.
Had it been my choice, it would have been different.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was just, hey man, let's, while everybody's at home, let's give everybody the fist. We need some music, something to look forward to. But, again, it was out of my hands.
Yeah. So are you planning on, if touring opens up this year, are you going to get out there with Tokyo Motor Fist?
I mean, yeah. I mean, if something, we had a bunch of things booked. One of the coolest things, we were in negotiations to actually go to Japan and play, Tokyo Motor Fist in Japan. So how cool would that have been?
Right.
Tokyo Motor Fist live in Tokyo.
Right.
But we're hopeful. I mean, I don't have much hope in this year.
Yeah.
But next year we're hoping to definitely be able to get back out there. We had a couple festivals booked and whatnot, but it's strange times we're in, brother. I don't know what to make of anything. I'm just kind of doing. Yeah, it's crazy, but you gotta watch what you say. You gotta watch what you say out there. So I'm just, I'm optimistic and hopeful, and I just want everybody to be healthy, wear a mask in public, and follow what they tell you to do.
That drives me fucking nuts.
Yeah.
We won't get into that, but
let's not. But so then let's go back 2008, 2007. I put Trixter back together, and we reunited after being apart for 15 years, and we made two great records. New Audio Machine in 2012, and Human Era in 2015.
Mm-hmm. I thought Human Era was probably some of your guys' best stuff.
Thank you for saying that. I agree, man. I got to tell you, those two records are probably, I'm prouder of those two records than I am of the original, the debut Trixter record and Here. Mm-hmm. Hard to top. Of course, we had the success with both those records, with the original records. But for a band to come back, after being apart for so long, to make two great records, and especially Human Era, I think. New Audio Machine was great, but Human Era, we were really at a great momentum, and I think that record really is kind of the best of both worlds. It shows a band from the 80s. It has all of that element, but yet it has a modern production, and it stands up against anything you'd hear on the radio, nowadays.
Very much so, I thought. Yeah, definitely.
Appreciate that, man. I'm glad you noticed that. And again, one of my proudest moments as a songwriter, producer, engineer, player, and the fact that we did it, because let's be honest, man, we all know how many bands from our genre, the 80s hard rock, when they come out with new records, and they're terrible. And just like
there's a lot. And the other thing is, it was the same four guys.
Yeah.
It's
a great thing. It was a great thing while it lasted, and of course, sadly, it didn't last. But it is what it is. Yeah.
So, how did you? Let's get into life after Trixter. You filled in with a bunch of bands.
Yes.
I mean, Danger, Def Leppard. You've been doing stuff with Dennis DeYoung, Eric Martin Band.
Yeah.
I mean, do they call you, or how does that work?
Well, it started out. I gotta say, it started out, 2013 with Def Leppard. That was where it became, sort of the thing. Vivian got cancer, and Phil called me and said, this is what it is, and we need you, and it all came about because the year before, Phil and I, we did the Mike Huckabee show on Fox News, and
really?
We did the Mike Huckabee show, and Mike Huckabee's a great guy. He's also a bass player. So he had this show where on Fox, and he would bring in all sorts of people, musicians and, politics on both sides. And Phil was on. Phil calls me up and goes, Steve, would you be into doing this thing with me in New York, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to bring my drummer friend out from California. We're going to do this thing, and we're going to do do a different version of Pour Some Sugar on Me and jam on some stuff, and Mike Huckabee's going to play with us. And I was like, of course, man. Phil's been, the Def Leppard guys have been dear friends of mine, and Phil's been like a brother to me for, 32 years. I met those guys in 1987, and their manager back in the day, Peter Mensch, Q Prime, was the guy who helped Trixter get their record deal. So Phil and I have been, again, we're like family. So when we did the show, we did, and I think you can find it on YouTube, but we did a version of, Pour Some Sugar on Me, and I'm doing the background vocals, sing along, jamming along with Phil. And, a couple days later, Phil called me up and he was like, Steve, I couldn't believe how great our voices blended together, and it was like, I didn't really think much about it. And then a year later, you know, I get the call from him and, their tour manager at the time. And the cool thing is that Joe and Phil were huge fans of 40 Foot Ringo. So we were actually 40 Foot Ringo. That was another missed opportunity. We were going to go out on tour with Def Leppard, I think on the, I think it was the X tour when it was like 2000, 2001. We were going to open up, but we just couldn't get enough money to be able to do it. We didn't have a record label, so we couldn't get tour support, but Joe loved the 40 Foot Ringo record. Phil, all the guys did. And they knew that I'm of my voice. And, and so Phil was like, Steve's the guy. He's got the voice to cover all the high Mutt parts and Vivian's parts vocally. And that was it. So 2013, I learned all the material. I was ghosting. I'd fly around and be waiting in the wings in case they needed me. But then 2014 is when I started doing my first couple shows. I went out on the Kiss Def Leppard tour in the summer of 2013. I rehearsed with them, would do sound check, learned how the whole machine works. And then, I did Wembley Stadium at the end of September 2014. Then I did 4 shows at the end of October, November, my first 4 official shows with them. And then right after that, the news got out. And then all of a sudden it was like, Dennis DeYoung needed a guitar player. Call Steve. He's the guy. And it was like, Danger got into a pinch where they needed a guitar player for some local gigs here in Jersey and North Carolina. And Bruno called me. He's like, dude, do you think you could learn like 16 songs in 2 days? And I go, I think I can. And, luckily I'm such a fan and I love Danger. So, and I love those guys. So it became like the thing. And, and over the last, almost 10 years, there have been numerous other big bands who've called me that I won't mention because it was secret stuff. Hey, man, you can't tell anybody, but we might need you. Right. And it's, I'm honored to be that guy, so it's like, it's cool. Listen, man, I make no bones about it. As far as a singer, guitar player, performer in the hard rock world, I can do that gig pretty much for any band. At the drop of a dime, and I have a system that I've come up with to be able to learn and, let's say, be able to flub my way through a show, and most of the people in the audience would never know.
Well, I was going to ask that. Is it to learn these songs? I mean, does it just come naturally to you, or is it like hard to remember? I mean, how long does it take you to learn a set?
Well, I mean, look, man, I'm not playing Emerson, Lake and Palmer music. I'm not playing Dream Theater stuff. It's not that intricate. It's, 80s hard rock. But with that being said, so Def Leppard, I was given a long time. They sent me a hard drive with all the songs live, and I was able to make Pro Tools, mixes of all the songs and solo, all of Vivian's parts, solo, all of Phil's parts, anything I wanted. I had a lot of time to prepare for that. And then right after my first couple Def Leppard shows, I did Rock of Ages on Broadway, filling in for Joel Hoekstra. And that was one of the hardest gigs I ever had to do, learning that. Oh man, Broadway, because first off, you don't get any rehearsals. You show up to your first gig and you basically you put your in-ear monitors in, you get on stage and you got to do it, and it's sink or swim. So that took me about 2 months of learning. I was actually rehearsing that while I was out with Def Leppard. I was like learning the Rock of Ages thing, but it's all about preparation, man. And, luckily it's all music that I love. Look, let's make no bones about it. Def Leppard, of course, one of my favorite bands ever. I've been friends with those guys, seen them on every tour since Hysteria. I know their stage show. I know the parts. I know the songs. It's part of my DNA. So when I had to learn it, I knew this stuff. Yeah. You know what I mean? It was learning all the little parts and, what part am I singing? And then, but with that, again, Def Leppard, people think, oh, it's so, it sounds so great. It's so, intricate. It's so easy to listen to, so sweet. Pour Some Sugar on Me. It's very intricate music. The
Yeah,
guitar
I was going to
parts.
say that's not easy stuff, Def Leppard stuff.
No, man. I mean, the stuff, especially a lot of the Steve Clark songs that that he wrote, and some of the other stuff, and some of the songs that people listen to and think that it's so easy. One of the hardest songs I ever had to learn with Leppard and play it live and perform it is "Let's Get Rocked." That is definitely one of the hardest songs to sing, to play, and perform live, with them. And I've done it in both chairs, playing for Vivian and playing for Phil. And man, it's still a challenge, really, really cool. And that's the great thing about Def Leppard. If you really analyze it, and then, you go, wow, man, this stuff there's a lot more to it. And that's why it's so timeless. And that's why it's not as cookie cutter as people think.
Yeah. Now, and they're not just playing the same guitar parts either. So when you filled in for both of them, correct?
Yeah, I did.
So you got to learn each individual's parts.
Yeah, that was challenging, but again, Vivian, I'd filled in, I'd done, 13, 14 shows filling in for him over, a 7-year period. So that part was really easy. When I had to take over for Phil in 2018, there was an emergency. I had to seriously go to the other side of my brain, and I had to go, oh man, I have to figure out these parts now. And luckily, again, I had done so much homework and learned their stuff so well on the other side that it wasn't that hard to learn the parts. And the other cool thing is I play in an 80s band here, this band called Rubik's Cube. So we were playing Photograph, we were playing Rock of Ages, and I was playing those solos and playing Phil's parts anyway.
Okay.
So it worked out, but before Phil left to fly home, he had to show me some of the bits, some of the stuff in Love Bites. And, again, man, you got to, those guys are like family to me, and they were in a dire emergency and needed me, and I was there to help them out.
You were there. Do you ever screw it up?
I don't think
like when you're supposed to be playing Phil's parts, did you accidentally play Vivian's parts?
Nah, the only thing, honestly, dude, the only thing that I think I did, I think I missed, I think I weaved in and out of some vocal parts, But now the only thing that you'll love this, the only thing that I'll say is I remember in 2015 when we were down in Florida and I was filling in for Vivian, we did Bringing on the Heartbreak, and I was having some guitar problems. I don't know what it was, but there was some problems with the channel switching. And so they had to leave me on like the dirty channel for the verse part. And I couldn't get my volume down enough. The gate was cutting off the guitar. So I was playing it like after the show. Joe said, I don't know what you did on Heartbreak, but it sounded like Van Halen, and because I was muting it, and that was a funny story, I'm like, well, I said to him, well, Ed Van Halen's my biggest influence, so yeah, that's not a bad thing, man, to make a Def Leppard song have a little bit of a Van Halen edge to it.
Had to change it up a little bit.
Yeah, but I had to do it because the gear was crapping out, and I was like, if I was like thinking, if I sit there and play the verse part, the arpeggio guitar part to Bring It on the Heartbreak, full on, like, with open strings, it's going to sound like a mess. So I just muted it. It was like it kind of sounded like Ain't Talking About Love in a Def Leppard.
That's funny.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, but you do what you do.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do.
That's it.
So last year we had, I want to touch on this before we go, but last year, it was the 30th anniversary, I believe, of the first Trixter record, correct?
Yes.
So with COVID and everything, I mean, did that ruin some plans that you had for the 30th anniversary?
Yeah, yes and no. I was trying, and I've been trying for the last couple of years I'm trying to get my master's back from Universal, and it's been really, really hard. Throw COVID and the pandemic into the mix. Nobody's working at the offices. So to get business affairs, the goal is that I want to get the master tapes. I want to get everything digitized. I want to remix the record. I want to do a deluxe 30th anniversary. Yeah, Yeah, so there were plans to do that, but I want to do it all on the up and up with them. So I have to go through the proper channels. So
Sure.
I think probably next year I'm going to really start hammering down on that when hopefully the business affairs people go back to the office and we can do this. But 30 years. I mean, looking back on it, PJ and I were just like laughing about it, just going, "Oh my God. That was 30 years ago." And luckily our brains, we still remember all the details.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, you guys had an amazing career. I mean, I'm sure there's nothing you can look back on and say, man, I wish I would have done this.
Not really. I mean, I got to tell you, Joe, it's like one of those things where every dream I ever had as a musician, as being in this rock and roll world, I live a rock and roll fantasy life. I lived it and I'm still living it, like that's the coolest part. And, again, getting back to what I talked to you about in the beginning, about the love of rock and roll and the love of music and making music and playing. Dude, I still practice guitar every day. Guitar playing, I wake up in the morning, I pick up my guitar and play for hours.
Yeah.
It's what I do. Love it. So just so blessed and, that all these opportunities come up and get to play, late in the second part of my career, getting to play with Def Leppard, getting to play with Dennis D. Young, getting to play
how
with
amazing is that?
It's really mind blowing, and then not to mention some of the other bands that I won't mention who have called, and I sit there and I just I tell my wife, I go, "You're never going to believe who called." And she's like, "Oh my God, that would be awesome." And I'm like, "I know." But it's just, again, I'm one of the luckiest guys on earth and I just love what I do. And, I'm just, I'm hopeful, that, maybe this year we get to do a couple more shows than we did last year. And, that, 2022, hopefully we can get back to some sort of a new normal of the rock and roll world, because of course I'm so hurt and I feel so bad for a lot of my friends, the crew guys and people who are, the wardrobe girls and wardrobe people, crew guys who work for all stage hands, where their lives have been turned upside down because of this, and it's just, I'm just hopeful that we can get back to sort of what it was, because as we know, it's never going to be the same.
No, it'll definitely be interesting. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of new music out. I mean, there's going to be people, just fighting to get on the road. That's going to be another interesting, that's a whole different conversation about when everything opens up and is safe. All these bands are going to want to come, what show are you going to go to? Who's going to pay for what? You know what I mean?
It certainly is. You hit the nail on the head with that. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. And I think it's all going to work itself out. And I think there's going to be the protocols are going to be so strict for touring and venues and stuff like that, that it's going to be kind of like I think the biggest guys are going to, probably have the first crack at it, and everybody's got to kind of make that decision.
Yeah.
I know a lot of big bands who do not want to tour until they can play to a stadium or arena that's packed. People,
Sure.
a lot of older dudes, a lot of the older bands, they don't want to play to a fucking, a 25 capacity arena or stadium. They don't want to do it.
Yeah, yeah. No,
you
can't blame them.
Yeah, it's not what we signed up for.
Yeah.
I've done a couple of these, with my 80s band with Rubik's Cube. I've done a couple of these socially distant concerts, man, where there's, 50 people, 100 people. And I love to be playing, and it's great to see people out, to get people out. But man, the vibe it's brutal.
Yeah, it's just not the same.
It's not, it ain't the old school rock and roll show that we love so much. So, again, let's pray, and hopefully everything's going to come back in some way. But, sadly, it's never going to be like it was. It's certainly not going to be like it was in, 2018 and 2019.
Yeah.
So just, but everybody keep a level head, and, hopefully we can get back to rocking.
Follow the rules. So.
Got it, man.
Right, you wouldn't think that was something you would be saying in rock and roll is follow the rules, but you need to follow the rules.
Yeah, it's true. Especially when you see some of the wild rock and rollers talking. I mean,
Yeah.
I've definitely had a lot of laughs with some of my buddies on the politics, the rock and rollers becoming politicians and lobbying, like that's a fun one to me, because that is something I'm so not into.
Yeah.
But it's, and when I see, guys that I know and that I'm sort of friends with, and commenting on politics, I'm like, dude, you should be worrying about writing better songs than this shit.
True. Very true. But all right, Steve, well, listen, man.
That's all for this week. Join us next week for another episode of the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show podcast. Available on all your favorite podcast listening platforms.